Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नैष्टिकी ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 14, the story of King Vena. So we are seeing that how the Brahmanas are going to react to the atrocities of Vena. Text 12. तद्विविद्धि असद्वृद्धो वेणास्माभिः कृपो नृपः सात्विन्तो यदि नो वाचं न गर्हिष्यन्ति अधर्मकृत् लोकधृक्कारसन्दग्धं हृदिश्यां स्वतेजसा. Translation.
The saintly sages continued thinking, of course, we are completely aware of his mischievous nature. Yet, nevertheless, we enthroned Vena. If we cannot persuade King Vena to accept our advice, he will be condemned by the public, and we will join them. Thus, by our prowess, we shall burn him to ashes. Purport. Saintly persons are not interested in political matters, yet they are always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. Consequently, they sometimes have to come down to the political field and take steps to correct the misguided government or royalty. However, in Kali Yuga, saintly persons are not as powerful as they previously were. They used to be able to burn any sinful man to ashes by virtue of their spiritual prowess. Now, saintly persons have no such power due to the influence of the age of Kali. Indeed, the Brahmanas do not even have the power to perform sacrifices in which animals are put into a fire to attain a new life. Under these circumstances, instead of actively taking part in politics, saintly persons should engage in chanting the Mahamantra Hare Krishna. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya, by simply chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, the general populace can derive all benefits without political implications. Hare Krishna.
So the sages, they began to think, we thought Vena will improve, and Vena, by his atrocities, is creating huge mischief to the people in general and also creating sinful reactions for us. And thus, by our prowess, we shall burn him to the ashes. Loka dhikkar sandagdham bhaishyama swatejasa. These are the words. Okay, swatejasa, by their own potency. They will sandagdham. We will just destroy him to the ashes. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, saintly people are not interested in political matters. They are interested in their own Atma Sakshatkar and also interested in taking people back home, back to Godhead and reviving the spiritual life of people in general. But sometimes, in the mode of emergency, Prabhupada says, when the political government is misguided or a misguided royalty, then the saintly people, they have to take charge. Right. And but in Kali Yuga, saintly people do not have that kind of a prowess, because tapasya is not that big, unable to uh, do such intense tapasya. Kali Yuga, everything comes down. Just like the Brahmanas, they are not able to perform the sacrifice where the animal will get the new life. Similarly, Prabhupada writes here, the sages, they cannot curse somebody and somebody would die instantly. That won't happen, right? Although there is another instance in the life of Srila Prabhupada and one extremely troubling personality, Mr. N, if you read in Lilamrit. Okay. And then you continue reading in Lilamrit. Okay. So Prabhupada says, instead of getting involved in the politics, instead of taking actively part in the politics, saintly person should engage in chanting the Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So one should chant Mahamantra, one should preach Mahamantra, and by the mercy of Mahamantra and by grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityanand Prabhu, things will become eventually favorable. And this we have seen, right? Last 400 years, where India was completely ruled by the Yavana kings and very, very ruthless tyrants. I mean, the way India survived. And now, the way there are temples everywhere, we can do far more things by spreading Krishna consciousness. Of course, those who want to do, those who can do politics, let them do. But as a devotees, we should do our part of voting right government and put our energy in spreading Krishna consciousness everywhere as much as we can. Yatha Shakti, Yatha Mati. Text 13. एवम् अध्यवसाय एनं मुनयो गूढमन्यवः उपव्रज्य अब्रुवन् वेणं सान्त्वयित्वा सामभिः च सामभिः translation.
Translation: The great sages, having thus decided, approached King Vena. Concealing their real anger, they pacified him with sweet words and then spoke as follows. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So concealing their anger, they pacified Vena with sweet words. And this is how Munaya Urchuhu Nrupavarya Nibodhaitat Yatte Vigyapayambho आयुः श्रीबलः कीर्तीनां ततत्तात विवर्धनम्. Translation.
Translation: The great sages said, Dear King, we have come to give you good advice. Kindly hear us with great attention. By doing so, your duration of life and your opulence, strength, and reputation will increase. Purport: According to Vedic civilization, in a monarchy, the king is advised by saintly persons and sages. By taking their advice, he can become the great executive power, and everyone in his kingdom will be happy, peaceful, and prosperous. The great kings were very responsible in taking the instruction given by the great saintly personalities. The king used to accept the instructions given by great sages like Parashara, Vyasadeva, Narada, Devala, and Asita. In other words, they would first accept the authority of saintly persons and then execute their monarchical power. Unfortunately, in the present age of Kali, the head of government does not follow the instructions given by the saintly persons. Therefore, neither the citizens nor the men of government are very happy. Their duration of life is shortened, and almost everyone is wished in bereft of bodily strength and spiritual power. If citizens want to be happy and prosperous in this democratic age, they should not elect rascals and fools who have no respect for saintly persons. Hare Krishna.
Now the Munaya Urchuhu, the great sages, they approached King Vena. Now these great sages headed by Bhrugu Muni. Okay, so this Bhrugu Muni is the leader of the sages and headed by Bhrugu. These personalities appeared. They said, all good fortune unto you and we have come here to give you good advice. And by following this good advice, your Ayu Shri Balakirtina Eva Tat Vivardhanam. Now look at the words. Tat. Okay, very dear, my dear son. Your Ayu, your Shri, your Bala and Kirti all will increase by accepting our good advice. So it is very important to accept the good advice of the ones well wishers. And the purpose of the Prabhupada explains that the monarchy was always advised over democracy because the great king was advised by great spiritual teachers. As recently as Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and he was advised by Sant Tukaram, Samartha Ramdas Swami, and these great personalities. Right. Even later also, Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj, the son of then later Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj. There is a great exchange of letters of Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj and Samartha Ramdas ji. And then there was another great personality, Brahmendra Swami. And he was very, very influential, and he was especially, towards the Peshwa kings and the Chhatrapatis. So, uh, in a monarchy, the king is advised by the great saintly people and by the Kshatriya power of the Kshatra Tejas and the saintly sages and the saints. This combination will lead to a very happy, peaceful, and prosperous kingdom. Right? And kings were very happy to accept the advice from the great personalities. Like we see Dasharath ji, as soon as the Ashtavakri Muni comes, Vishwamitra Muni comes, they will make them sit on their own throne, wash their feet, and ask for the advice. But in the modern age of Kali Yuga, things have gone very topsy-turvy, and that's why we see the symptoms of also that. Ayu, Shri, Bala, Kirtanam, everything is on decline because of disregard to the advice of great saintly personalities. And therefore, Prabhupada says, in the democratic age, one should not elect any fool or a dishonest man, but one should, who does not have respect for the saintly persons. Of course, the saintly person should be genuinely saintly because there are many saints and swindlers in the guise of the saints, and the king should be genuinely respectful to such a saintly personality. Text 15. Dharma acharita pumsam vangmana kaya buddhibhi lokan vishokan vitarati athan anatyam asanginam. Translation.
Those who live according to religious principles and who follow them by words, mind, body, and intelligence are elevated to the heavenly kingdom, which is devoid of all miseries. Being thus rid of the material influence, they achieve unlimited happiness in life. Purport. The saintly sages herein instruct that the king or head of government should set an example by living a religious life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, religion means worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should not simply make a show of religious life, but should perform devotional service perfectly with words, mind, body, and good intelligence. By doing so, not only will the king or government head rid himself of the contamination of the material modes of nature, but the general public will also, and they will all become gradually elevated to the kingdom of God and go back to Godhead. The instructions given herein serve as a summary of how the head of government should execute his ruling power and thus attain happiness not only in this life but also in the life after death.
Yes. So now the sages they further described dharma achariti pumsam, that following the principles, the regulative principles of the religious principles. How? By vak, mana, kaya, buddhi. By vak, by words, mana, mind, kaya, by body, and buddhi, by intelligence, you can be elevated to the heavenly kingdom and achieve unlimited happiness in the life. My dear Vena, Tat, you are looking for the happiness, you are looking for the control, you are looking for all that you are looking for. Atyantikam, infinitely you will attain when you will follow our advice. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, one should perform devotional service perfectly with body, mind, words, and good intelligence. And this is how one should be elevated, gradually elevated to the position of going back home, back to Godhead. So these were the instructions coming from the great saintly personalities. Text 16. सत सतेमां विनशते वीर प्रजानां क्षेमलक्षणः यस्मिन् विनस्ते नृपतिर् ऐश्वर्यात् अवरोहिति. Translation.
The sages continued, O great hero, for this reason you should not be the cause of spoiling the spiritual life of the general populace. If their spiritual life is spoiled because of your activities, you will certainly fall down from your opulent and royal position. Purport. Formerly, in practically all parts of the world, there were monarchies. But gradually, as monarchy declined from the ideal life of king, religion, to the godless life of sense gratification, monarchies all over the world were abolished. However, simply abolishing monarchy and replacing it with democracy is not sufficient unless the government men are religious and follow in the footsteps of great religious personalities.
Yeah. So here, the sages, they are clearly saying you should not be the cause of spoiling spiritual life of the people in general. If their spiritual life is spoiled because of your activities, you will certainly fall down from your very opulent and royal position. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains previously, everywhere there was a monarchy. But because of uh, the very senseless life, the life of sense gratification, we know the French Revolution, right? The queen, citizens were crying for the bread, and when they approached the queen said, "If you don't get bread, eat cake." And she was so disconnected, so self-absorbed, and thus monarchy was abolished everywhere. But Prabhupada says abolishing monarchy is and replacing with democracy is not the solution unless the spiritual life, the religious life is kept in the center. Text 17. राजन् असाधु अमात्येभ्य चोरादिभ्य प्रजानृपः रक्षान्यथा बलिं गृह्णन् इह प्रेत्य च मोदते. Translation.
The saintly persons continued, when the king protects the citizens from the disturbances of mischievous ministers as well as from thieves and rogues, he can, by virtue of such pious activities, accept taxes given by his subjects. Thus, a pious king can certainly enjoy himself in this world as well as in the life after death. Purport. The duty of the pious king is described here very nicely in this verse. His first and foremost duty is to give protection to the citizens from thieves and rogues, as well as from ministers who are no better than thieves and rogues. Formerly, ministers were appointed by the king and were not elected. Consequently, if the king was not very pious or strict, the ministers would become thieves and rogues and exploit the innocent citizens. It is the king's duty to see that there is no increase of thieves and rogues either in the government secretariat or in the departments of public affairs. If a king cannot give protection to the citizens from thieves and rogues, both in the government services and public affairs, he has no right to exact taxes from them. In other words, the king or the government, the taxes can levy taxes from the citizens only if the king or government is able to give protection to the citizens from the thieves and rogues.
Yeah, it's a long purport. So we'll see in two sections. The sages, they further advised that, my dear king, you can accept the taxes only if you are able to protect the citizens from thieves and rogues. And Prabhupada writes that such a pious king certainly enjoys his life in this world and also in the next world. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the duty of the pious king is explained here. The first and foremost duty is to protect the citizens from rogues and thieves, and there are two types of them. One is the actual rogues and thieves, and second is that the ministers and the officials who will always incline to usurp their power and exploit people in general. And therefore the king has to be extremely strict, and he has to be very pious and very strict, so that the ministers don't become to the category of thieves and rogues and exploit the innocent citizens. And then the king gets the right to accept the taxes, and the taxes can be later utilized for material and spiritual welfare of the masses. So this was the instruction. Yeah, please continue.
In the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam 12.1.42, there is a description of these thieves and rogues in the government services. As stated, prajas te bhakshayishanti mlecha rajanya rupinaha. These proud mlechas, persons who are less than Shudras, representing themselves as a king, will uh, tyrannize their subjects, and their subjects, on the other hand, will cultivate the most vicious practices. Thus, practicing evil habits and behaving foolishly, the subjects will be like their rulers. The idea is that in the democratic days of Kali Yuga, the general population will fall down to the standard of Shudras. As stated, Kalau Shudra Sambhavaha, practically the whole population of the world will be Shudra. A Shudra is a fourth class man who is only fit to work for the three higher social castes. Being fourth class men, Shudras are not very intelligent. Since the population is fallen in these democratic days, they can only elect a person in their category. But a government cannot run very well when it is run by Shudras. The second class of men, known as Kshatriya, are especially meant for governing a country under the direction of saintly persons, Brahmanas, who are supposed to be very intelligent. In other words, in Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapar Yuga, the general populace was not so degraded. The head of government was never elected. The king was the supreme executive personality, and if he caught any ministers stealing like thieves and rogues, he would at once have them killed or dismissed from service. As it was the duty of the king to kill thieves and rogues, it was similarly his duty to immediately kill dishonest ministers in government services. By such strict vigilance, a king could run the government very well, and the citizens would be happy to have such a king. The conclusion is that unless the king is perfectly able to give protection to the citizens from the rogues and the thieves, he has no right to levy taxes from the citizens for his own sense gratification. However, if he gives all protection to the citizens and levies taxes on them, he can live very happily and peacefully in this life. And at the end of this life, he be elevated to the heavenly kingdom, or even to the Vaikunthas, where he will be happy in all respects.
The 12th canto describes the theme of the 12th canto is description of Kali Yuga. So there it is very beautifully described. Actually, we will get lot of faith in Srimad Bhagavatam if we just read even the translations of the 12th canto. How the dynasties are described. There is a name of Chandragupta Maurya. There is a name of Chanakya. There are so many different dynasties are predicted 5,000 years ago. And then there is a description of Kali Lakshanam, the symptoms of Kali Yuga. So one of the symptoms is the Dasyu Rajakuleshucha. The kings invariably will become the plunderers and the thieves. Right. And therefore, when we have a good government, it is so very rare to have a very good government. Prabhupada writes here, these proud mlenchas representing themselves as the king will tyrannize the subjects and will cultivate the most vicious practices. Right. And by practicing the evil habits, behaving foolishly, the king and the subject, they will rule as the rulers. So, what a different time could be than this coming true. This is always true in Kali Yuga. That the kings will have very, very tyrannical. We know that Akbar, the so-called, supposed to be a great person, he killed 30,000, the Sanatani devotees, to acquire particular title. What kind of history we have been learned and what kind of history we have been taught. If you want to know really good history, there are very good handles on Twitter. One is True Indology is one, and there are Of course, there are many other good handles, especially on Twitter. There are many good people to follow. So, and then people will, and the kings will have, wrong habits. No, I mean, we are in the midst of these epistine files. What has happened was, of course, this is not the subject matter of Bhagavatam, but the wrong habit here is the epistine was a rich man, and who used to, just normalized prostitution amongst the very rich people like Bill Gates, ironically, even Stephen Hawkins, and and then Trump Baba, to what to speak, his name is coming 1,000 times in that epistine files. And the activities were so degraded. Less than 16-year-old girls were taken to the island, and all these people were trying to exploit, not trying to, they were exploiting them there. And all these were at times recorded. Some of these instances were recorded, some of these instances were, the filmed, photographed, and all those files. And this fellow later was captured, he was in jail, and he was killed in the jail. I mean, so that many other things should not come to the public. And these are the behavior of modern day people. This is what we are hearing day in, day out. Okay. And Prabhupada says, and this is how the kings are, this is how the praja is, and such praja is going to elect the kings. At least in the previous ages, there was some sense of dignity to the praja. Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, Satya Yug, the praja was more qualified, and even the qualified praja was not used to elect their ruler. The ruler was always the monarchical ruler. But in Kali Yuga, the irony is that Praja is extremely disqualified. Kalau Shudra Sambhava, it's the fourth class Praja. Of course, Shudra, whenever we say, it is always Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. And such fourth class people are coming together and electing their leader. Right? And therefore, the condition in Kali Yuga is extremely degrading. There is no question of the king who can have such a strong ruling. Prabhupada says previously the king used to immediately kill the rogues and thieves, and the ministers acting as the rogues and thieves. So, and therefore, people were very happy and people had great respect in the king. The conclusion is that unless the king is perfectly able to give protection to the citizens, he has no right to levy the taxes from the citizens. Otherwise, he will become very severely implicated by the laws of karma. If he follows the instructions of Shastra and the Sadhu, he can live very happily and thus enjoy his life in this world and also in the next world. So, a very nice verse next. We will just recite this. Yasya rashtre pure chaiva
Yasya rashtre
Rashtre
pure
Pure
chaiva
Chaiva
Bhagavan yajña purushah
Bhagavan
Bhagavan
Yajnapurushah
Yajnapurushah
Ijatte svena dharmena
Ijjate
Ijjate
svena
Svena
dharmena
Dharmena
Janaiर्varणाश्रिमान्वितैः.
Janaiर्varnashramamritaiः.
Janaiर्varnashramamritaiः.
Translation.
The king is
Translation.
supposed to be the pious. Go ahead, Mataji, please.
Translation. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observes the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashrama, and where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations.
Yeah,
Purport.
so purport will
Yes,
take it
Prabhuji.
tomorrow.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yasya rashtre pure chaiva. Now look at the word rashtra. Very, very important. Sometimes people say, oh, it is only because of the Britishers, you got this concept of nation. Before Britishers, there was no concept of nation. Look at the word here. Okay. Yasya rashtre pure chaiva Bhagavan yajña purushah. Concept of nation is not coming from British. Concept of nation is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. Right. Bhagavan yajña purushah ijatte svena dharmena. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observe the Varnashrama Dharma. Ijatte svena dharmena, the scientific division of Varna and Ashrama, where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupation. By using their occupation, they are actually worshipping the Supreme Lord. Real Karma Yoga. We will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
everyone.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you,
Thank you,
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Ako dicha channel na.
Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhupada.
Prabhuji. Hare
Na bare
Krishna.